Folks in the hall, um, but I can see the Zoom folks and the folks in the hall. I feel you out there, so really good to be with you. And yeah, good to be back. It's been a while. So for those of you who aren't um, familiar with me, my name is Kirsten, and my pronouns are she and her. And I'm calling in from, as I was just saying, White Salmon, Washington, which is ancestral lands long stewarded and still stewarded by many different bands of indigenous tribal people, the Cayuse and the Umpqua and the, yeah, gosh, um, the Warm Springs, and I'm forgetting one band. Maybe it will come to me later. But anyway, and also by black bear and salmon and deer and just a wonderful ecology of kin up here. So tonight I was going to give a talk on the topic of dana, generosity, and we'll start by giving ourselves the generous act of practice, of practicing together. What a generosity of the heart to ourselves and the world. So let's let's begin and inviting everyone to find a posture that is really suitable for settling in here. And oftentimes we speak to that combination of alertness in the body. So if possible, the spine being straight and a kind of readiness for practice, and then a sense of relaxation. All the unnecessary holding that we have an opportunity to release and relax together. It's your preference whether you choose to keep the eyes open or closed. And if open, just maintaining a soft, non-focused gaze. And beginning here in this posture of dignity and rest, uh, resting back with a sense of intention that we're coming to practice together as a way of honoring life, as a way of trusting life, of really receiving life. And you might seed any other intention that you have for being here this evening, for practicing together. Seeding an intention can really help focus and frame our practice. And perhaps taking some deeper breaths, and on the exhalations, relaxing. And scanning the body. You might already be familiar with certain areas of holding. Some common areas are behind the eyes, the jaw, diaphragm, pelvis. Sometimes even the brain. Just sensing if there's ways that any contraction or constriction in the body can just be invited to relax, not demanded, just invited. Bringing the attention, allowing the attention to be drawn into the present moment through an anchor, something that beckons us here, here, we're here. Oftentimes that's the breath. And if that's a supportive anchor for your attention, bringing you here. Starting with the breath. And if it's not supportive, you might use the whole sense of the body, seated or lying down. Or sound coming and going, just receiving sound. Whatever the anchor is, can it be met with receptive attention? So we're receiving the breath, receiving the sensations of the body, receiving sound. And as attention gets pulled away, drifts away, we get to practice letting go of distraction and giving the gift of our awareness back to the anchor, back to that which keeps us here, receiving the present moment. And again, every time that we get lost in the thinking mind, an opportunity to let go. And returning to receiving the present moment and giving the gift of our attention to this moment. You might even sense a kind of heart quality to this gift of bringing the attention here. You might also take a moment to sense if the body has become contracted. Is there any subtle leaning forward or towards? Any subtle trying? Just again, inviting that to relax and engaging with that quality of receptivity. Receiving the breath, the body, or sound. And in doing so, we're just naturally giving our attention to the here, to the now. In the remaining few minutes of our sit, you might try letting go of the anchor if you've been attending to that, and allow the attention to be wide, and receiving all experience. Noticing whatever's most prominent. And as that fades away, it's replaced by something else at another sense door. Allowing a full receptive presence. Thoughts and the thinking mind just being one more element of experience we can notice, but not get involved in. Like being a satellite dish for everything that's arising and passing. Allowing it all to come and to go. you for your practice. We'll take a 5-minute stretch break and come back for a talk and some conversation. So see you soon. I can ring a bell in 5 minutes to indicate our time. Yay. So welcome back, everyone. And for those of you who didn't get my name, I'm Kirsten, and I'm calling in from White Salmon, Washington. My mind couldn't retrieve the name of the Yakima tribal peoples who were longtime stewards and still are of this land, as well as many others, Cayuse and Wasco and Wishram, and there's quite a lot of work with repatriating native land out here. Actually, it's quite encouraging. So one form of generosity for sure. And that's what I'm feeling called to talk with everyone about today. It's very much inspired by the month-long retreat I just had in February, where Adam Stonebreaker was there too. He was my hall mate right across the hall. And I'll speak a bit to that retreat experience as well a bit later. But I thought that I would just start us off by kind of doing some, probably review for some of you around this concept of dana, which is a Pali word that is often translated as generosity. And then I'll kind of bring in a couple of examples from my life and retreat and sort of what's inspired me to consider this really as the title suggests, a way of being in the world. What is it to actually engage in the world in a generous way, from a generous heart? So to start, this practice of dana, of generosity, has such a high place in the teachings of the Buddha. He actually began his teachings with generosity. That was the kind of the origin of everything. And then based on this foundation, he talked about the importance and benefit of sila, of ethics. And then came the bhavana, the meditation practices of calming the mind, the insight practices that we engage in together here. And then once a person had really kind of cultivated this wisdom and compassion in their mind and heart, the Buddha often instructed those people to then go out and be of service to the world, which again is this act of generosity. So you can really consider the Buddhist path as beginning and ending with this virtue. And dana is also the first of the 10 paramis, the paramis being these aspects of the mind and heart that need to be developed for real clear seeing, for clear understanding. So they begin with dana, with generosity, and then they move into virtue, to sila, to renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, equanimity, such beautiful qualities of the heart mind. And what's so beautiful too about all of these, and including generosity, is that they can really be developed in daily life, on the cushion and off the cushion. And they really help purify the heart and mind and simplify our lives so that these kind of seeds of wisdom, of insight can take root. So at its most basic level, dana in the Buddhist tradition really means this giving freely without expecting anything in return. So it's coming out of this compassion, this goodwill, this desire for another being's well-being. And so over and over again in suttas, there's this emphasis that gift giving is not dependent, it's not contingent upon the amount or the content of what's given. It's really the attitude. It's really, what is the quality of mind and heart in giving? What's the intention? This is some words from the Samyutta Nikaya. Some provide from the little they have. Others who are affluent don't like to give. An offering given from what little one has is worth 1,000 times its value. I don't know if others have experienced this from people who have so little, but I lived in the Garhwal Himalayas in India for about a year back 20 plus years ago. And I started to learn that if I went to these villagers' homes, I couldn't compliment them on anything because the next thing I knew, I'd be walking out the door with, all the things I thought were, pretty or admirable. They would just give it to me and insist to give me their precious things. And they had so little. I mean, these are people with dirt floors and wood stoves and, one shawl, one sweater. So this, again, this just beautiful quality of generosity that can be so touching, from those who, again, have so little. So when asked where a good gift should be given, the Buddha would say, wherever the mind feels inspired. And then the teachings actually say that one should give a gift without injuring oneself or others. So there's no obligation to give. And then there's also this recognition that we need to look after our own selves as well. And again, there may be, we see it in ourselves or others, this tendency to overgive and deplete our own selves. So without injuring oneself or others, how much, what, when, and this is a practice, this practice of dana. So we actually can ask ourselves those questions of what and when and why. Why do we give? And in considering these questions, we can learn so much about ourselves, about this quality of dana, this quality of the heart. And so this why of giving, the Buddha often emphasized the joy of giving, that dana is practiced when the giver is delighted before, during, and after. This delight, like what a joy to be able to give. So what's the manner, what's the attitude of our giving? And are we feeling obligated, or is there this kind of underlying sense of I should, or if I do this, I'll be liked or admired, and that's all fine. It's fine to have those conditioned tendencies, but, to ask ourselves what's motivating giving is a really important learning experience. The when do we give? I remember hearing Joseph Goldstein talk about how whenever he felt any kind of inspiration to give someone something, sometimes we can have those little moments where we'll see something or think of something or and this kind of delightful thought of, oh, giving my neighbor a batch of cookies or whatever that is, because I know she really likes chocolate chip cookies. But he said that he started to develop the practice of whenever he had that thought, just right there going ahead and doing it. Because we can have the thought quite often. I know I do. And then, time kind of goes and I never really act on it. But that was a practice he implemented that, could be fun to play with. Like, what is it to actually have those kind of generous thoughts and then just really bring those into the world? And, it's also a practice because it helps us to notice when the giving feels sticky. When do we feel like we don't have enough for ourselves? And again, sometimes this is wise practice to reflect on what we're truly able to give. But we can also see how fear closes the heart. This fear to give, to extend ourselves. And this closing of the heart, this fear is um, it's a very self-identified fear. It becomes all about me. It becomes very small. Um, and that is one thing that I have found so profound about generosity is that it's not um, it's not just done because we think it's virtuous. It is. It's beautiful. But in addition to this joy we can feel in the act of being generous, it's a practice that helps connect us. It connects us with others, it connects us with ourselves. It's deeply relational. It creates this relationship between the giver and the receiver. So we're learning more about the relationship, the nature of our relationships, and we're learning more about what is it to develop those. And more we might start to sense that this kind of sense of separation starts to diminish and that we innately start to feel more compassion. There's maybe I'll share a little bit. There's a little bit now of the retreat experience. Yeah, yeah, I'll share a little. So I came into the February retreat really depleted. Um, I had been sick off and on for about a month and been working really hard, and I'd been on the road for a couple of months too. Um, and so I got to retreat, and usually I have so much enthusiasm to be on retreat. I'm so excited and grateful, and there's a lot of Dhammachanda, like energy for practice, um, and I noticed that the mind was really reluctant to practice. It was just like I had to really kind of convince it to get on board, to get present, to do the practice, to be here. And it was complaining a lot, whining a lot, really just wanted to check out a lot. And uh, and so after a handful of days, um, I started to transition to doing quite a bit of loving kindness practice, metta practice for a benefactor. And that practice is not, as some of you are probably familiar with, I mean, it takes some energy because there's a kind of three-pointed uh, concentration that we're engaged in with metta. It's the phrases, and then may you be safe and happy and healthy and at ease, and then there's kind of imagining that we're directing these towards another being, and then there's the quality of the heart, this kind of sense of like of care, of love. So it's not a kind of lazy practice by any means, but what was so profound for me was as soon as the mind started engaging in the practice of giving love away, of and that's what metta is. It's just giving love. It's giving love. It changed everything. It was like not about me anymore. It wasn't about, the mind didn't care that it was tired because it actually became a practice that's for the world. It was just for the world. And that kind of way in which that self-identification, that sort of small sense of self, or even a sense of like, oh, I'm doing this practice for my own liberation, it can be very confining. But when we actually can transition and that this practice is done for the world, or this life is lived for the world, there can be so much joy and uplift in that. And as much as there was this attitude of giving, 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 the more life was coming in and filling me up. So it was a real deep, profound lesson in what is it to give love in that way and receive love in that way, until at some point we're just in this mix of where giving and receiving is kind of the same thing, you know. So I might touch more on that in a few moments. I'll kind of get back to my little trajectory here, but wanted to share some of this inspiration, from what it is to, even when we're tired or worried or concerned about our own lives, this turn to giving it away is so onward leading. It can bring so much joy and uplift and energy to our lives. And then, it starts to feel natural to share. It's to not have it be done just for ourselves. And it brings us in direct contact with anatta, with this sense of no separate self, that we're actually interconnected here. There's a couple stories. Let's see which order. Well, one is just a small thing, but teacher Rob Burbea, he would actually recommend that if there's a lot of kind of hindrances up in the mind, heart, that one attitude we can take or one view is to actually imagine that we're taking those from another being, that by our experiencing of that suffering, we're actually sparing someone else, the aversion or the wanting or the spacing out. And again, like just noticing, what does that do for our attitude with practice, for our engagement with practice, to really feel like, oh, not only does it kind of turn us in a sort of subtle way towards accepting what's happening, which is kind of the profound aikido that we do in this practice, that what we resist persists, but as soon as we kind of turn towards and accept, that second, third, fourth arrow is gone. But it also extends our practice beyond ourselves. Again, that we're doing this for others. And it's not like we're in these kind of isolated boxes, these worlds. So this is the story that I keep wondering, do I say this now? Because I have some things I want to read and other things I'm just sharing. But this is a story from Ajahn Sucitto because, well, okay, actually, I will back up a little bit, because how I want to contextualize this story is to also talk. So there's this piece that I'm touching on, and I'll weave this back in about this practice of dana, of generosity, as being directly linked to insight, directly linked to what it is to loosen that sense of separation, of separate self, to recognize, this level of interconnection of no separate self, and to not identify so much with this narrow sense of self, which fundamentally is so painful and constricting and limiting. But I think it's also deeply important, this practice of generosity, to our current moment, because it's non-transactional. And how subversive is it, to have non-transactional generosity in this time of, such rampant capitalism. And this normative assumption in capitalist cultures, countries, that we're supposed to compete with one another, that it's a sign of success to have more and to keep it. And, if we look at this increasing gap between rich and poor, the economic inequality in this country, in the world, it's supported by this view that we were justified to take at the expense of others, and that it's not just okay, but it's actually admired. So what is it to really disrupt that conditioning, that deep conditioning? And so I'm finally getting to this story I found so lovely from Ajahn Sucitto, where I'll just read it. These are his words. No, in fact, I was reading a while ago about a social model that is used on some islands in the Indonesian archipelago, where the aim is to gain as much debt as possible. What happens is this: you get in your canoe with your pig and you paddle over to another island where you give somebody your pig and they give you a coconut. They are then indebted to you because your pig was worth more than their coconut. Now they have a bond with you because they are indebted to you. Then they take their pig and swap it for somebody else's pineapple, so that that person is now indebted to them. In this way, they gradually create a whole network of feeling connected, of belonging and owing something to everybody else. This movement of energy enacted between people, and often between a person and the land, I love that, a person and the land, is what constitutes a firm sense of being in the world, rather than trying to find a place of one's own in the world, which always leads to stress. In the island's system, a really important person is one with such incalculable debts that there is no way they can ever pay them off. They are indebted to a whole village or a whole island, and it is impossible to pay it all off. Such a person is considered to have made so many connections that they are a success. I just love that. How counter is that to the culture, kind of the economic normative culture that so many of us, I think, have been raised in? And this puts us directly, in communion, in relationship with each other. I work so closely with Gil Fronsdale and the Insight Meditation Center and Insight Retreat Center. And as some of you may know, IRC, the Insight Retreat Center, runs entirely on Dana, entirely on Dana. And, a Mountain Stream, I know, is actually probably and pretty much virtually all on Dana too. These organizations that start with this principle. And Gil has spoken about how gratitude and giving and this kind of rest. And these are qualities that support our meditation practice. This relaxation, this trust. Oh, is my internet okay? Okay, great. I just got a message. Thanks. Um, and Ajahn Sucitto as well, he talked about this trying to find a place of one's own in the undoing the stress our minds create takes a more selfless mode of being. So there's a journalist I really like, a British journalist. He's also an author, an environmentalist, and justice advocate. George Monbiot. Monbiot. I never know how to pronounce his name. George Monbiot. Anyway, he writes quite a bit for The Guardian, and he wrote a piece recently that I really liked, and he was kind of speaking about our political moment, and that he writes that every government should hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But as they do with climate and ecological breakdown, freshwater depletion, the possibility of food system collapse, antibiotic resistance, nuclear proliferation, most governments now seem to hope for the best and leave it there. So, though there is no substitute for effective government, we must seek to create our own backup systems. And then he writes, start with this principle. Don't face your fears alone. Make friends, meet your neighbors, set up support networks. Help those who are struggling. Since the dawn of humankind, those with robust social networks have been more resilient than those without. And that's gratitude or generosity right there. You know, those acts of supporting others, of helping those who are struggling, of making friends. You know, that's generosity, that's dana. And again, not only is this in principle kind of counteracting that deep conditioning of kind of an individualistic oriented, more capitalist culture, but also, you know, it's really helping us to create cultures and systems that can um, help us survive and thrive in these times. So, uh, I I'll share a little bit more about my retreat, fresh out of retreat. I wonder, I haven't listened to your talks, Adam. I wonder if you've been sharing retreat moments. Um, but so in 2002, it was a year before 2002. In 2001 was when I was living in India and I got really sick, and that's how a lot of my health concerns began. So then in 2002, I was sitting, I think it was the second month-long retreat I'd sat. And this was at Spirit Rock. And I was working with Jack Cornfield, and he said, well, Kirsten, he heard about my health issues. He said, well, Kirsten, I want you doing metta. You know, 100% metta. Metta is a concentration practice, kind of similar to what I was describing before. And not only that, I was working with him and Trudy Goodman, and they were really worried about me losing weight on the retreat because I came back from India pretty thin and underweight and was having digestive issues and all the things. So they proceeded to supply me with food for the entire month of retreat. And I would go in to my interviews, or my practice discussions, and Jack would say, so what are your favorite foods? You know, do you like, there's these really great like Scharfenberger chocolate puddings. Like, do you like those? Do you like avocados? What about cookies? Do you like cookies? And they would fill the yogi fridge with food for me, like snacks and high fat, high calorie things. At one point, midway through the retreat, I'm sitting in the dining hall and Jack taps on my shoulder. And I mean, I didn't know it was Jack. I had a tap on my shoulder and I turn around and it's him. And he says, Kirsten, I have a hamburger. Do you want it? This is at, you know, a vegetarian retreat center. So anyway, there I am, you know, doing metta, receiving all of this dana from my teachers. And and I look back on it now and it's interesting. My practice was not ripe enough to really receive that gracefully, actually. There was a lot of dukkha for me, feeling special, feeling like I was, you know, a burden in some way, feeling like uh, I wanted to, you know, just not, um, I didn't know how to express my gratitude. I'm not sure if any of you have that with receiving, like, oh gosh, now I have to say thank you, and I don't know how to say thank you in a way that communicates how deeply appreciative I am. So, so yeah, it was actually quite painful for me. And and then here it is, 20 plus years later. And here I am again, engaged in a lot of metta practice. And I have a dear friend on the retreat who started leaving me things in the yogi fridge. This was not something I asked for. Um, but uh, but he had an assistant. He was there for the 2 months. He had an assistant who was buying him things, and he decided to bring me in on the on that. And there I am. I have like berries and yogurts and anyway, little things. And it was so beautiful to see the way in which kind of practice and probably maturity and, the paramis and, all of the things of just like being engaged in this long time patient practice of purifying the heart and mind that, this time it was just like, oh, what a delight. It just touched the heart so deeply, so deeply. I let it in. I let it in. And I think that's the other piece that I want to share. There's what is it to give ourselves away, so that life is not just about our own small kind of world, our own means and ends, but what is it to be of service, to give this life, to be in connection. And then there's this other piece of what is it to actually allow ourselves to take in, allow ourselves to receive, allow ourselves to be, blessed by life. And I kind of pointed to that a bit in the guided practice together of, there's ways we can really experience practice itself. We're receiving life. Wow, what a gift. What a gift to be alive right now and to be present for life right now. I mean, there's so many um, metaphors about how precious and unique it is to be in this human life and then to be exposed to the Dharma and then to be engaged in the Dharma. Wow, what a gift. And the joy that can come in really being nourished by that. And then the gift of we give our attention to this moment. Wow, we can do that. We give our love to the Dharma. And what is that? To be in a reciprocity. I think that's a word, that kind of speaks to this giving and receiving, is to be in reciprocity. Every morning, sometimes I miss it. So most mornings, I say hello to the land here. And I have like a little bowl of lavender that I've harvested from the lavender that grows outside the yurt. And I've dried. And I sprinkle a little lavender underneath this pine tree that's right outside. And I put my hand on the pine and I put my hand on the earth and uh, I I give thanks and I send love. And I give uh, metta, to this land here, to these trees here, and to all beings. And what an uplifting practice. Like right away, I am connected in the morning. Every morning, I'm connected. I'm right away just in relationship with the world. So again, it's this kind of interesting way in which the gift is the given. We're given as we give. So it's really the uh, the freedom that we develop to relinquish clinging. We get to practice this relinquishment of clinging by giving ourselves away and by receiving that which comes. And that's the practice right there. That's the insight path. That's where we develop and learn that kind of freedom. That everything that comes, we experience and let go. We give that away. There's one more thing I'll share, and then I'll end with a poem. Just another. I studied quite a bit with James Barris, and many of my long retreats, my month-long retreats have been the February month-long with James. And at the end of the retreats, you know, he'll give some advice, suggestions for, you know, after you're sitting like for that long, what's going to help support your practice. And you know, those of you who have sat retreats before probably are familiar with those kinds of talks. And you might also be familiar with, you know, that there's a certain level of concentration that can develop when we're sitting in silence on retreat. That's different from maybe our practice in daily life, where we're a bit more distracted and occupied with the doing than really giving ourselves that full permission to just be in practice like we are on retreat. And it can be really sweet to have that mind so still, so concentrated. Can be really beautiful. And so there can be a kind of clinging at the end of retreats, like, oh, I don't want to give this up. I don't, you know, how long can I keep it? How long can I keep it? And James would say, you know what? The easiest way to work with that is you just leave retreat and you just give it all away. Give it away, give the concentration away, give the stillness away, just give it away. And again, it's like, wow, what wisdom there, right? Because by changing that attitude from clinging to generosity, from hanging on to just not even letting go, but just giving away, that attitude of the heart, that is that is the insight right there. That's the freedom. That's where we get liberated. So I'll end with this poem and then would love to open it up for discussion. And this is a poem by Mark Nepo called Accepting This. Yes, it is true. I confess. I have thought great thoughts and sung great songs. All of it rehearsal for the majesty of being held. The dream is awakened when thinking I love you. And life begins when saying, I love you. And joy moves like blood when embracing others with love. My efforts now turn from trying to outrun suffering to accepting love wherever I can find it. Stripped of causes and plans and things to strive for, I have discovered everything I could need or ask for is right here in flawed abundance. We cannot eliminate hunger, but we can feed each other. We cannot eliminate loneliness, but we can hold each other. We cannot eliminate pain, but we can live a life of compassion. Ultimately, we are small living things awakened in the stream, not gods who carve out rivers. Like human fish, we are asked to experience meaning in the life that moves through the gill of our heart. There is nothing to do and nowhere to go. Accepting this, we can do everything and go anywhere. Thank you for the generosity of your attention. And yeah, we have about 5-7 minutes for questions or reflections.
This is Jen Scott. Hi, everybody on Zoom. I'm here in the hall with one
Hi,
microphone.
Jen.
And so if anybody here would like to make a comment or ask a question, just raise a hand. Great. I think we'll start here in the hall if that's okay. I'll pass the mic and start with your name. Thanks.
Hi, this is Douglas. You touched on this a little bit at the beginning, Kirsten, where you talked about, you know, in giving, not causing harm to yourself or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to your description of of you being on retreat and having Jack um, heap upon you all sorts of delightful foods and stuff, and you felt kind of uncomfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've noticed and have experienced recently um, peop- uh, um, people who are very excited about wanting to give to me, and
Mm-hmm.
yet I somehow feel uncomfortable, like I'm being imposed upon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit.
Douglas, I think I spoke a bit about, generosity as a practice where we get to learn so much about ourselves and our relationships, the kind of why and the when and the where. And I think that your question is speaking to that exploration, right? Like, why is it that I feel uncomfortable? Is it because there's a sense of non-deserving? Or is it because, like you said, maybe there's a way that you're picking up that it's um, something that the giver is doing out of a sense of their own joy, but maybe not very attuned to what you want or need? I think all of that is just really skillful exploration. And if there are those times where it's like, oh, is this truly a gift that feels like it's, you know, uh uh uh, for me, like the intention is pure, or is there some other piece here? It could be a nice conversation to even just start relationship with, like, oh, I'm not, I'm feeling less excited than you are about this gift, or whatever that is. So I don't think I'm answering, uh, precisely your question, but I am encouraging that and inviting that exploration. Does that feel like satisfying enough?
Yeah, that's a good beginning, you know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's
Well,
definitely things to explore there.
yeah. 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 I mean, I'm sure we could sit down together and talk for an hour about all those nuances. So maybe for sake of time, just that invitation of being yeah,
Yeah,
attuned.
kind of there's a line sometimes maybe fine between giving and imposing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So really being attuned to that, I think, is important. Yeah, thank you. Hmm.
Hi, we've got another comment or question in the hall, so I'm kind of scanning the Zoom screen, but I don't think we're jumping the line. Okay, start with your name.
Thanks. This is Paul. It's a ripple on that last question. So it struck me when you were talking about that, that there was dukkha, involved with you receiving so much, and you said special, being special. Can you
Hmm.
say a little more about what that means to you or why that is suffering?
Yeah. Oh, I love that you picked up on that. So, for me, it's kind of remembering back to my 22-year-old self and the stories that were being told in my head that were creating that dukkha. And I think that what you're pointing to, again, I'm kind of having to like do a little bit of psychological work to answer that. But I think that there was like a worthiness, this unworthiness and this sense of I'm not special, I'm not worthy. And I don't want, that it felt like it didn't the the generosity didn't match a kind of a story of self that was running, that was operating on a level that I was believing. Yeah. Does that sound does that make sense?
Yeah, so a little push me, pull you of do I deserve it? And but what I thought you were pointing at was more like ego, like a kind of a if I'm special, that creates suffering, that's a kind of separation. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think all of that is, I mean, this idea of mana, a sense of self, and the Pali, that the Buddha talked about. If we think we're better than others, we're suffering. If we think we're worse than others, we're suffering. If we compare ourselves to others and think we're the same, we're suffering. That this basic sense of self is wrapped up in dukkha. And so what was really getting stirred up, and again I said, oh, my practice wasn't that ripe at that point, right? And there was a lot of like stories about who I am that I was very attached to. And um, yeah, a kind of sense of I don't deserve, of unworthiness, of um, you know, not wanting to be special or stand out, not wanting to take what might be for others, all of those things, yeah, were causing pain. Yeah.
We have another comment or question from the hall. Again, I don't want to step on any toes, but I think we're good.
Okay.
Hi, this is Constance. And I just recently went through an illness that taught me so much about so many things, but was in the hospital up here in Grass Valley and, you know, hanging out between life and death for a while. And just the receiving
Mhm.
that the forced to take was like from the nurses and the doctors and my family, and it was just like, and I couldn't resist, which would be my modus operandi. It's like, oh, I don't need anything, I'm okay, let me do something for you,
Yes.
and just having to surrender. And then
Yes.
I ended up going back home to Marin. I lived down the road from Spirit Rock, and I was again very weak, and I went back and people had food in my refrigerator. People were coming. It was just, and it felt so good to receive. And that was one of the first times it was like, not feeling guilty. I can get very teary when people are good to me. But it was such a lesson. And then just seeing angels everywhere. That we're being blessed and given all the time from the earth, from the trees, from the plants, the animals,
Right.
from the
That's right.
people.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Constance, I'm so glad you ended us on that note. And I'm so sorry for your, for that health
Blessing, blessing.
blessing. Yeah. But I can relate so deeply to what you're describing because also from a very strong sense of, I'm okay on my own, self-sufficiency, I don't need anyone. That was the story running most of my life. And getting sick and my experiences of being hospitalized and on that brink, you know, oh, learning how to receive. Wow, learning how to receive. And what a gift that is to be in reciprocity. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. Well, thanks for the comments and reflections and questions and yeah, and for just the Sangha this evening. So I'll lead us in a little dedication of merit, and then we'll have some time for announcements. So, uh, perhaps closing the eyes if that feels good, and just bringing the attention to the heart area. And again, you're reflecting on perhaps all that's been received today, food and company and fresh air and water and the Dharma practice. May our time together be a gift to ourselves and a gift to the world. And these practices of wisdom and compassion that we cultivate here be of service, that all beings everywhere be safe from harm, healthy in body and mind, peaceful and happy. Know a sense of belonging to this world. May their hearts and minds know true freedom